Hey, Bright Lights, welcome back to the Space Doctor series on the Architecting channel. This is the place to come for thoughtful weekly videos that demystify the science behind design for well-being. And I should know, I'm your resident expert and architect, Angela, who has devoted my whole career to studying something called salutogenesis or health-generating design. I know how important this is, but I want to make it fun and accessible for everyone because the built environment has such a huge impact on our lives. So, to do this, I developed a deck of cards that has two parts. The first part are different theories that relate to psychology, anthropology, sociology, neurology, what makes up our well being. And the second part are five theories that my research has shown form foundational aspects of design for well being. I'm also a feng shui practitioner, so I've associated each of those five aspects with a feng shui element as well. And what I do every week is I draw a card from each section of the deck. This lets me talk about both of those concepts together. So you want to tune in every week. Make sure you like and subscribe this channel because even if I pull a card that I've pulled before, when it pairs up with a card from the other part of the deck, the conversation is going to be different. So let's go ahead and get started. The card we drew today from the fundamental concepts part of the deck is the environment. So this is part of something called the exposome, which is essentially the soup of everything that we are immersed in as we go about our lives. There are two parts to the exposome, the socioeconomic part, which is a different card, and this card, the environment. So this is everything from the air and water quality that we have, whether we are in a noisy or quiet environment, whether there are toxic chemicals present, essentially anything in our external environment that can either be disruptive to our physical health or can be restorative to it. So the card has this duality. The top of the card, which is upside down, is sort of like a toxic, polluted factory kind of environment where there's really no nature and it's very, very unhealthy. On the other hand, the bottom part of the card, which has the smiley face, is showing us, clean air, blue skies, a park, lots of nature. And as you can imagine, these have a profound effect on us. In fact, it's even tied to lifespan. People who live in zip codes that have a poor quality exposome for the environment actually have a shorter lifespan because these things take a toll. It impacts how well children do in school. It impacts things like asthma and other diseases. So, this is a really important card to pay attention to. Now, I never know what I'm going to get when I pull cards, and this week's card from the five aspects deck is from the self-efficacy aspect, and it is hierarchical barriers. I think this is a really interesting pairing. At first, when I pulled them, I was like, what? How do these two cards go together? So let's start with explaining self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, or I can, is essentially empowerment. Do you believe you can do it? And the research behind self efficacy shows that when people believe they can do something, they can do it. So this goes for everything from if you want to quit smoking, or if you want to achieve a goal, or even if you believe that you belong in a space, which is what we're going to talk about today with this card. Self-efficacy is associated with the feng shui element of fire. Fire is the spirit. fire is determination and will. So you can see why that pairing makes a lot of sense. Now, in the card here, we've got this sort of sacred portal, seemingly lofty, important place up in the clouds, and this big, long stairway, and it's kind of guarded there. And that just represents something that feels like we don't belong there, like we're not important enough or special enough. So maybe we value that destination. Maybe we would like to be there, but we don't feel that we're allowed to go. And the mountains represent difficulty, represent a journey. So, what does that mean when we think about design? Well, so often we'll walk into a place and maybe there's a big high counter and it feels kind of like a fortress, and there is somebody behind that counter and we feel like we cannot move freely through the space, that we need that person's permission, or that we are being watched. In healthcare settings, I work in my professional career doing hospital and clinic designs. We have to really pay attention to that because patients often don't feel empowered because there are all these subliminal hierarchical barriers that get set up between the clinician and the patient or family member that make them feel that they do not have power or control, that they're not an active partner in their own care management, but rather they have to be good and listen. You'll see this in a lot of spaces like libraries or municipal buildings. We see it in schools with the way the teacher's desk is set up. There's a clear us versus them kind of a relationship going on. That automatically makes us feel like we don't have control and we don't have choice and we don't have agency when we are in those spaces. A lot of times we'll even see this happen to children where there are certain cues in a space, like how high up something is, or whether something is made to their scale or not, that says you matter less or are less important. You don't get to make your own choices in a space. So, how can we think of this in terms of putting these two cards together? What do they mean? Well, I think that in this particular case, it comes down to an equity issue. We know that more often people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged are probably going to live in a less healthy environmental exposome. And just the fact that that is going on has created a hierarchical barrier. Perhaps they can't afford housing that's in a healthier kind of environment. So they suffer and they don't feel they have the agency to move forward. Perhaps they don't have access to reliable transportation. So it's harder for them to get and keep a good job. So there are things like that that are part of the environment that are reinforcing a hierarchical barrier. You'll see things like freeways that cut off neighborhoods from other walkable communities and make the residents there isolated. You'll see things like airports or other things that create contamination being located close to neighborhoods that are socioeconomically disadvantaged because those people don't have the political acumen or the legal resources to complain or fight back. So that is where I think we can have the environmental exposome itself being a hierarchical barrier to the well-being of people. I hope that gave you a lot to think about. I always love hearing your stories. Make sure that you share them with me either through a comment down here in the comment section or you can head over to the Architecting Podcast account. That is me, and leave me a DM or a post. And you can also find me on my Architecting LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. And remember to like and subscribe so that you get a notification for each week so you don't miss a chance to have this conversation and learn more about how design impacts your well-being. Take care.